Question number 38. How do you persuade a girl to accept an open relationship with you? You should write down an SLA, present the terms to her, and see if it meets their expectations. Hey friends, this is Podcast Room by Software Engineer. I'm Perry Tiu, and this is freaking episode 40. I can't believe it's been 4 or 5 years now that I've been doing this show. Just want to say thank you to everybody for listening, whether you started just listening today or it's been, you've been part of the journey of the past couple of years. For those who know, I guess every 10 episodes, I just take the time to do a quick Ask Me Anything. It's really to recalibrate and to figure out, hey, what the hell am I doing? But also, I think really just get involved with the people listening. I've sent out requests to you guys on Twitter, on Instagram for some questions, and you guys definitely delivered. I think I've received over maybe 100 questions or something, which is a new record. This is the 4th edition of the Ask Me Anything. It's been really cool because I think I asked you guys for questions about really all kinds of topics. It was like tech, life, blogging, podcasts, all that kind of stuff, and you guys really, really just submitted everything. So how this format works is basically I split up in different categories. There's tech, career, life, travel, food, and miscellaneous. And I'll be numbering them throughout the whole episode, so you guys can probably follow if you guys want to. And of course, if you guys want to submit questions for the next one, feel free to follow me on Instagram, on Twitter. Just go to perrytiu.com, that's PERYTIU.com, for all my socials, and you can definitely just check it out over there. And of course, if you haven't done it yet, hit the follow button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on the new episodes of Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. Anyways, big thank you to you guys again for listening to the show. Let's get into the questions. First category, tech. Question number 1, Java or JavaScript? Neither. But real quickly, for the people unfamiliar with Java and JavaScript, they're two programming languages, but they're surprisingly different, as in you can't write JavaScript and then run it inside of a Java environment and vice versa. Of course, there's exceptions, but in general, it doesn't work that way. The best analogy I could have for this is both tools, I guess, allow you to bake a cake at the end of the day. But the thing is, on one side, you have a stand mixer and a knife, and then on the other side, you have a hand mixer, but an angled spatula. So it's just two different sets of tools that end up, allowing you to create something at the end, a cake or a program or whatever it is. But learning how to use each tool is just the difference of skills between both of them. And of course, some tools have limitations, whereas other tools have better advantages for doing other things. So considering the fact that Java and JavaScript, two different sets of tools, I personally, if I had to choose one for the rest of my life, I'd have to stick with probably JavaScript. I've used JavaScript for way many years than Java. And I guess the flexibility, the fact that it's very modern and it's going quickly, of course it's a little bit younger than Java. It's something that I personally find appealing, but at the same time, it doesn't have static typing unless you add TypeScript on top of JavaScript. So, but yeah, I guess on the mature side of Perry, Java would be a, secure, safe, scalable, and if you work in a large org, there's a lot of good guidance and guidelines already baked into the language, so that's a good answer. But on the other side of Perry, where it's a bit more wild west, and I want to build everything in the world, I'm gonna have to go with JavaScript for this one. Question number 2. What's your least liked programming language? To be fair, I don't hate any languages. They all have their features, and I absolutely respect everybody who designed language. But I guess the one that gave me the most trouble over the years, of course, is JavaScript. There's so many dumb things cannot read field of undefined. But I guess that's part of how it catches error and throws errors and everything. But other honorable mention that I personally didn't like as much sometimes is MongoDB doesn't really count as a programming language, but some of the queries didn't like it. We could debate about this for another 2 hours, but that's something that I remember using daily and being this is really dangerous and really dumb. Why am I allowed to write this in Mongo? And the other one that's a little bit dangerous as well is Ruby. Not saying that you can't write clean code with Ruby, you definitely can, but you kind of need a framework, a suggested framework like Ruby on Rails to just have a bit more guidance, because the same thing as JavaScript and Ruby is a bit of a wild west. Question number 3. What are some hard technical challenges you faced, and how did you approach them? I've been a software engineer in the web system space, so I mostly focus on front-end, back-end, full stack, but never really on mobile, and never really on fully dedicated database or infrastructure or anything like that. But having seen so many applications, some of the hardest technical challenges are usually asynchronous, updates or asynchronous events that kind of happen between all the systems. What I mean by that is, if you think about, race condition is somebody's doing something, but by the time you're done doing that task, somebody else has already modified the asset that you're changing. These inconsistencies usually what makes the problems hard. And you can really see that in a lot of different examples. Like, for example, if you want to update a row in a database, let's say it takes you 5 seconds to update that row, but then after 3 seconds, somebody else has already updated that row. So by the time you finish, it doesn't contain the updates that should have been there before you started your transaction. Those are usually like really mind-boggling because they're extremely hard to debug and you don't really know how to approach this. So to answer the question how to approach this is you kind of need like a profiler. You kind of need something that tells you like step by step. So a lot of people use debugging. So when it comes to a problem like that, you just find your step by steps. You figure out, is it a race condition to begin with? Which system is causing this race condition? Why is it so slow? And then you're able to have a fighting chance. I know it's very vague how to describe this, but it usually has something to do with asynchronous events, asynchronous functions that are firing, and not having a good logging system or debugging system is really what makes you, as an engineer, super aggravated with these challenges. But it really marks you, and I do remember a lot of these events, so I guess it's part of the experience. Question number 4. What do you expect when working with a QA? How do you make the most out of that collaboration? You can't expect a QA person to do everything. What I mean by that is, quick context is a QA individual usually sits either directly on a team or they're part of a QA team that helps software engineers, test their code, whether it's before it goes into production or after it goes into production. And the thing is, you can't just give a PR to a QA and then be like, there you go, build everything or build a testing framework out of it. That's just not realistic and not fair and so much work. Unless your QA person is basically the developer and they already, or they're the one that built the feature and they just know already how to do all of that. It's just not the best relationship you could have with a QA individual. I guess the expectation is that you just want to make sure that you give them all the information they need to make sure that the feature works. And a lot of time I use a lot of happy paths. That's the word I usually use is, hey, we built this feature. I built this PR. This is what it's supposed to do. Here's the happy path. Here's a bit of maybe edge cases. And here's what you should consider if you're testing it. Whether it's doing automated testing or they're just manually testing that feature. Those would be the kind of, resources that you could provide between the QA and the engineers. Or else they're just going to end up pissing off the QA team, and they're genuinely the last team you want to piss off. So shout out to everybody testing software. It's probably the hardest job out there. And of course, I don't think any companies are successful without it. Question number 5. What's a tech topic or skill that people think is complex, but is actually easy to learn and understand? The first answer that jumps into my mind is for loops. I'm pretty sure some of you may have seen the opening theme of The Simpsons, where you see Bart on a chalkboard just writing the same sentence 50 times in a row. That's effectively what a for loop does. You tell it to do something infinitely amount of times. And the for in for loops is spelled FOR, for X amount of times do this. If anything, stop everything you're doing and Google something like for loops JavaScript. Learn how to do it. It's probably 5 lines of code and it's pretty legible if anything. When you've done that, call me and we'll have a great conversation and it might make you see the world a bit differently. Question number 6. If someone would be looking to pursue a career as a software developer, are there any courses that you'd recommend? Yes, Liv, thank you for this question. It gets me really excited because I get to share this story of, I have a couple friends who are just not engineers. They don't have engineering backgrounds. And then they picked up a course on udemy.com, udemy.com. They don't pay me to say this, but they've done the courses. It costs less than a pint in New York City, and they are software engineers nowadays. So the example that I will have is you would go onto udemy.com, find a course that is generally programming beginner friendly, so something like JavaScript or Python. There's a lot of great examples out there, and it would cost you maybe $12 USD or something like that. And once you do it, I genuinely have seen so much good content and so many great people that took that and then started building more stuff out of it. So that would be my recommendation, is start with JavaScript, start with Python, find a course on udemy.com, and stick with it. If you stick with it, I genuinely think you'll be successful. Question number 7. What's something that excites you about tech, and what's something that doesn't? Well, what excites me is people learning how to code. But more on a broader level, I don't have a cool answer of what excites me in tech. I know some cool answers would be the next frontier of AI or the next space technology out there. Those are, cool topics that people are those are really good things to be excited about in 2024 or whatever. But I think what excites me in tech more than anything has always been startups. I've worked for a million startups at the end of the day. And then most people know that startups kind of exist maybe for just a finite period of time. Sometimes they appear and then disappear. And the fact that you could just live your life without ever hearing about some of the startups does happen. And what excites me is hearing about them. Whether they're successful or not, I do know that the point of a startup is to build things in a different way, maybe in a different light that people are seeing. So I'm a sucker that every time I read the news, whether it's TechCrunch or anything like that, I just love hearing about, hey, people are revolutionizing this, I don't know, CRM space to manage your calendars better or something like that. It's a very non-cool answer, but that really excites me about technology and how people leverage it. And it could also be something very low level to be like, oh, somebody invented a new format to pass JSON information better. I could go on and on about this, but that's really what excites Perry personally. And in terms of what doesn't excite me, it's tough to say. You could hear from me that I'm usually excited about everything in tech, but sometimes when you think about like the low level stuff of, do we use 2 spaces or 4 spaces when we indent? Those kind of things, like, they're more on the smaller level. Don't get me wrong, there's a reason for both of them, but it's just, in terms of excitement, I could probably talk about it for maybe like 10 seconds, and then after that I'll be like, I really don't care about this topic, can we just talk about something else? So that's probably like the level of least excitement for me, is really kind of these like maybe syntactic sugar in different kind of languages. Question number 8. Which website or app would you get rid of to make the world a better place? Are you baiting me to say TikTok or something? Because I'm just kidding, I don't use TikTok, but at the same time, I can kind of defend how TikTok has its pros and cons. The cons being it just sucks so much brain time from everyone, but the pros of TikTok, at least, is you learn so much stuff on it, from what I heard at least. You could be like, oh, here's new recipes about things, or here's how to build a new shed, only from learning it from watching these short videos. So that's kind of how I see a lot of these web apps and applications that are being shared across the world. So if there's a website that I need to get rid of to make the world a better place, I would say the Fantasy Premier League app, because I spent so much time on it, losing brain cells and hair, just to figure out the best team and still do terrible at it. Question number 9. What's the end of programming? Will AI take all our jobs? If there's any hopefulness to this, I think there's no end to programming. Programming, I mean, back then it was like, sure, write one line at a time and then put it inside a machine, and then it's like a punch hole system, and then it's like really clunky. And then once it gets into more, I guess, like modern, it all happens like virtually on the computer, and then it just runs on all your little bits in your computer and everything. But programming, I think the concept itself is never going to die. There's always going to be people out there trying to like input a set of commands and run it somewhere, whether it's through, I guess, a robot maybe in the future, or whether it's still on computers. I think that's kind of how programming has evolved over the years. The languages, for example, I think like the old school languages, you have, I don't know, your COBOL from back then, and you have your Fortran from back then, and then you have your Javas, and then you have your newer ones like Go and Rust. Like, there's always this evolution. So I keep on thinking that programming will keep on evolving, regardless if it's literally writing a lot of code and running it, or it's just inputting it into a different machine and let that machine do what it needs to do. In terms of will AI take all our jobs, I think so, question mark. But also at the same time, people need to know how to operate a lot of these models and these AI and how to even use their capabilities. So I think in terms of programming and AI and where our role as humans in all this is basically, we just need to learn new skills as we evolve. Developers are going to be programming with a new set of tools and new set of maybe programming languages with it. Question number 10. Which AI impresses you the most? When we talk about AI, I think we usually think about the stuff that is tangible that we could use, like some of the cool things that you could use nowadays. ChatGPT, you could just go on their website and you could just ask questions and it will answer pretty smartly, intelligently what it is. So, and those are all, I guess, like its own being. It's not like a hard-coded Wikipedia page where it has all the answer. It kind of just generates it on the fly, and that's kind of where this, I guess, like impressiveness comes from. I kind of gauge it as, if I can't reverse engineer something within, let's say, like a day or a week, it's impressive. And if you think about it, in this world, there's probably a million things I can reverse engineer very quickly. So when you come to talk to ChatGPT, or even like some of the robotics that happen out there, where somebody could program an arm that has like a 360-degree capability of picking up stuff and throwing balls, and all those concepts, for me to understand, wait, how does it translate code into something that could throw and catch a ball on its own? That's where my brain kind of be like, okay, that's pretty freaking cool. Question number 11. What are the negative effects of AI within the software industry? One of the examples that engineers use nowadays, there's this thing called Copilot, where it basically writes code for you. It sounds crazy, but all you have to do is you start typing what you want to implement, what you want to code, and this thing is like an autocomplete, and it just autocompletes the code that they think you're about to write. And surprisingly, it's accurate, and that's the scary part between all of it. So, in terms of the positive side is that, yeah, you're writing so much less code. The negative side is that you're kind of losing a bit of control in terms of what gets spit out as the autocomplete. And also, if you don't recognize what's bad about the output that is generated, it's very easy to just kind of slowly lose control and just having more and more of this show up all around your code base, and then having maybe this incohesiveness, just because it's never guaranteed that the code that is spit out at this section might be the same, I guess, like intent or the same context as another bit of code from a different part of the code base. There are companies out there that actually have this technology. I can't remember the name of the company, but they actually learn your code base and then generate code based on that. And that's even more crazy. So I think like there's not really any limitations. In general, I just think the negative side of AI is probably how things can go wrong, and not every company has a resource to handle things when it goes wrong, basically. Question number 12. What do you think about the Apple Vision Pro? Well, that's some hot news. For those who are unaware, Apple released this kind of gadget that you can wear like a goggle, like a ski goggle, basically. And it kind of enhances your real life experience of, hey, let's pull up a window, and then you see like a 3D window in front of you, and then you can interact with it with some really cool touch haptic technology. So that's kind of what we're talking about over here. To keep it short, I guess, I've never used one, but I think if it's significant enough to change your day-to-day, then I absolutely think it's impressive in the sense of smartphones. It changed all our lives because we don't leave our houses without it, basically. It's basically another part of our hand, another part of our arm. So my thought about the Vision Pro is that, will it be this similar effect where one person can't live without this specific gadget? And I think there's going to be a world with it because it may have some benefits that some people really will depend on in the future. Take whatever I say with a grain of salt. I haven't used it yet, but I could definitely see why it can change how people are more accepting to wear smart goggles, I guess, on their face. Question number 13. What technology do you think investors should be paying attention to? I think my simple answer is robotics. I think people have said this over the years, but now more than ever, this wave of hardware startups that are coming up, there's so much attention and so much value in it. I keep on saying robotics arms, but there's a lot of them where it's like, oh, let's do, I don't know, like automated boats and automated delivery service, and a lot of these kind of like more hardware focused. Maybe I'm just with a small sample to think about it, but I think if anybody wants to be looking at, hey, I have some bit of investment money, maybe robotics, you could get something out of it. Another field that might be interesting is I spoke to a recent guest, and she works at a venture firm where they focus on developer tools, and anybody who works in tech uses developer tools. So the more and more people end up being in that ecosystem, which I'm assuming is growing every year, then of course there's going to be way more opportunity to help these people out by building tools for them. So developer tools is another area that investors might want to look into. Question number 14. What's the next big thing in tech? I wish I knew because I would have been a freaking billionaire by now. But I like this question, the next big thing. I'm not an oracle, but I really do see technology just being more efficient. Of course, people throw the word AI, but I think more about automation where, hey, why do I have to like spend 4 steps into mailing a package when you could just do it in maybe 1 step and something else is automated and you don't have to worry about that? So I think it's a lot of these like workflows that we do day to day, whether it's like very simple day to day task or on a corporate level where it's like you have to talk to 3 people to get this agreement and then you have to deploy this application. I think it's kind of where tech is evolving, which it's been similar in the past couple of years where it's always taking complex workflows and making them easier. So the next big thing in tech, I don't have a singular thing, but I think automation, whether it's a robot following you in the grocery store or even a robot just doing all your groceries for you. Right now, you can kind of asked, I guess, somebody to do it for you on like Instacart or something. But I think it's kind of just like making it more intelligent, more sustainable. Basically, I'm just saying we're going to have day-to-day life-sized robots soon. Well, that was some fun tech questions. Let's go into the career section now. Question number 15. When did you decide tech would be your calling? I know usually calling, you don't really like decide on your calling, like it calls you. But I remember this one singular action I did was that in university, I joined as a double major in physiology and math. And after the first semester, I did not enjoy it at all. So the action I did was I went out to the portal, I looked to change my degree, and I looked at what I could change it to. And it was a drop down, and one of the options was computer science. So next thing you know, change it, swapped it, and I guess that's kind of my calling from that point. Question number 16. During your career as a developer, who is the person you've learned the most from? Yeah, that's a hard question. There's so many people I could call out right now. What I could say is, I guess the people that I've met quite early on in my career as a software engineer, I've learned so much from them just because at that point everything is so new and everything that you do is like, oh wait, this is cool. This is something I could stick with me. So I'm going to give two call outs over here is on the technical side as a software engineer, I've learned so much from Carlos Braza. He's been on the show before. He's an engineer that I used to work with back then in London, and in terms of learning from him, it was so interesting because he's a little bit older than I am. He's got a couple more years of experience than I do, but back then it was something about geeking out building web systems. Didn't matter what it looked like, didn't matter how it needed to be the perfect piece of software or not. It was about the ingenuity of just piecing it together and explaining it to other people because we were working as a team, so the whole team needed to understand how that works. So I feel like a lot of the practices that I learned, not just from him, but a lot from him back then, still marks me today, and I try to use that to be a better software engineer. So that's call out number one. Call out number two is the CEO of that company, Will Swannell. Mostly on the operations side. I mean, of course, I've learned coding with him. Will was also like a hands-on engineer, which was kind of really cool. But learning how to operate like an engineering team, but also like a business at the same time, and thinking like the different ways, witnessing firsthand in terms of, oh, if you do this, and I'll unlock like the sales team to do X, Y, Z. I still think a lot about that. So I think those two individuals, among many, many, many others, are individuals I learned from in my career so far. Question number 17. Who's your biggest inspiration? On a personal level, my mom. There's no debate about that. Fortunately, back then when my dad and my mom immigrated to Canada, they're just great people. They definitely had, I guess, a big challenge in front of them. But yeah, I think they've moved to Canada with three boys. We're with three boys in a family, and every time I look back, it's just a shit show. But somehow they really just stuck with it, and we're all quite healthy and happy nowadays, so I can't really ask for more. And if you look back at every single step, there's just something to take away from in terms of how inspirational their dreams, our dreams, everything just kind of came together. I mean, it's not over yet, but it's just a lot of it that you just want to, be thankful for. On the professional side, though, it's not really one singular person that I could call out in terms of my biggest inspiration. My biggest inspiration is people that just don't have a tech background, and then they got into tech, and then they're doing more tech, and then you could see in their eyes the stuff they're learning and the gleam in terms of, wait, this is really cool. That's my biggest inspiration, because I remember the first day when it happened to me, kind of. It doesn't matter at what point in your life when it happened, but it's really just when you could see somebody being excited about something. Absolutely the biggest inspiration. I take that and I try to make sure that in my own life, I try to still be inspired day to day and excited about stuff day to day, because without that, then what's the point? Question number 18. What are the most difficult types of decisions when people managing, and how do you approach them? So I've been an engineering manager for the past couple of years now, and in terms of people management, there's so much emotions behind it. We're all humans at the end. I know there's like the professional careers, professional growth, professional like coding and working as a team and having, good PC around work and everything, good ethic and all of that. But then when you talk about people management, there's so many parts where it's like, look, we're just human. Why can't we talk like humans? Why does everything has to be like so corporate at the end? So I think some of the hardest decisions or something type of actions in people management is just letting people know if they're doing well or not. Especially when they're doing not, it's trying to convey the message that, hey, we all do something not as good as we think we do sometimes. Perry definitely does stuff very terribly at the end of the day. But it's really trying to give good, positive feedback at the end. And it's really hard because depending on the individuals, you could say the same thing, but different individuals hear a different thing. So I guess it's kind of like the message is only clear if you're able to say it clearly and the receiver is able to receive it clearly. Yeah, I think the difficult part is not fully understanding how people will receive the message beforehand, but you can solve that by giving a good baseline. If you have a good relationship with somebody already, and they know that you're open to give feedback or you're open to receive feedback, whether positive or negative, that's already a good baseline to work off of. So you kind of have to figure out that baseline really quickly, and sometimes it comes naturally. Sometimes you just get along with people. And you could really say anything you want, and people will understand what you're saying if you have a reason to say it, of course. But then on the harder side is if you don't have this connection, this baseline with people, and then you come up to them with, I guess, some lesser good feedback, then they might take it as something lesser, I guess, expected, which may cause a bit of issues if you leave it that way. But a lot of times you do find a way to clarify everything. So I really do like working with people just because of all this human factor behind it. Question number 19. If you could do anything different in your career, what would it have been? I think for the people who I speak to quite constantly, people know that I complain about not making like a company, like a startup for the past like at least a decade. I feel like since I started working, I was like, I'm going to make this company, I'm going to make that company. So I think it's not really a regret. It's not something completely different, but maybe be more serious about that earlier in my life to be like, okay, you have your main job, but also you could look into expanding into your own company at some point and earlier. And to be effective about that is that you just got to, I guess, commit more in terms of if you're going to commit to that path, then at least incorporate earlier in your life. I've incorporated my first company very, very late in my life. So, well, late is relative. But I could have incorporated that sooner. So that's kind of like the differences where when I think back of what I could have done sooner rather than different is be just, I guess, more courageous, more adventurous out there, and then just share more about what I'm doing. It's really hard to keep track of what people are doing nowadays. I mean, of course, you have your LinkedIn and all your social media, but yeah, just sharing your ideas more. I think a lot of that would have been great if a couple years early, give me 5 years back or something, I've started my company, even though I still work full-time or something, and then still share my ideas with people and be like, oh, this is what it's building, this is what it's going to be and all that. You could always do that earlier, but it's not easy regardless. Question number 20. What's your dream imagine anything is possible job? Being a software engineer and engineer manager, I absolutely love it. Of course, you get to build so many cool things and work with so many great people. But on the other side, like, I love meeting new people and talking to new people. So in terms of making that into a job, if I get to really just tour the world and keep on doing this podcast and talk to great people, or even host maybe like a live panel, or even host like a daily talk show with like more techie or more formal stuff behind it, that'd be super interesting. So who knows, maybe one day. Question number 21. What are some of the biggest differences in work culture from the countries you have lived and worked in? So for context, I've lived and worked in a couple of different countries in Canada, US, England, Hong Kong. Mostly at techie jobs, I guess, at software engineering jobs. So I guess work culture is normally you have different departments. It's not just a tech department. So I guess the interaction of like the people in Hong Kong, for example, how come there's no space for anybody? Like, not just work, just anybody. It's physically a tight city. So I think people are just like forced to be a little bit closer, and you kind of just learning so much more about their personal life. They love talking about like, oh, either going on hiking or what they're passionate about, like doing photography or just exploring the city, because it's a very mobile city and people seem to enjoy sharing about it. Interestingly, the place I worked at didn't really have like a lunch break room kind of thing. So what we would end up doing is we would go to around the area and just eat around there as a team quite often. And when you have people around food and you work together, you just seem to have a good conversation. So that work culture was quite fun. When I moved to London, it was kind of similar, but it kind of kicked it up a notch. I think the company I worked for was maybe an outlier, but it was a startup environment. And even in the startup environment, you have like different departments, like the sales, the account managers, and the engineering team, and then the finance team, and all that kind of fun stuff. But I think the people that made the culture, as in like London, it's very diverse in the sense of, sure, there's English people, but it's English people not just from the south or from the north, from London itself. It's like a mixture of every parts of England. So they bring with them their own culture. And in general, English people are very, I guess, honest and transparent. I love it. It's something about like, why are we bullshitting when we could just get the job done and being more honest together? So that's one of them. And of course, you have like people from around the area, from France, from Germany, and everybody that works in London, but from those countries, and they bring with them their culture and their influence. So I think work culture wise, it's a really good mixture of like honesty and also getting stuff done and being curious about other things. But also you would all end up at the pub at like 5 p.m. nearly every day of the week. So it was something about gelling, and I don't think there was that much spat between people. I mean, of course, every company has a bit of spat between people, but work culture wise, I absolutely enjoyed it. And then when I moved to America, I've said this a couple of times, people agree with me, is that everybody thinks they're going to get canceled. Whether it's work culture, even just their daily life, everybody thinks they're going to get canceled. So a lot of times when you go into work or when you work with other people in America, people are, I guess, more aware about what they're saying. Of course, in England, people will shout the C word across the office, and it's like, that's totally fine. But in America, there's always maybe just a bit more touchiness behind it in terms of people are a bit more aware of their career and kind of like dissociate their professional and personal life more clearly. I guess the boundaries are more set. And I guess it's for the better at the same time as there's cons behind it. So, but yeah, in America, I don't think I've drank as much in America than in England. So that's maybe something that people are interested to know about. But work culture wise, of course, we do go out in America, like after work sometimes to drink, but it just wasn't as ingrained in the culture as in England. But in terms of people, like in terms of brilliant minds, you have absolutely people that are just like stellar, whether you're in any of these cities. But in America, maybe there's a higher concentration depending on where you're at. I was fortunate to work in San Francisco and New York City, and the concentration of smart people in these two cities, just like in London, but some of the expertise that you can't find anywhere than, let's say, the Bay Area. It was just so fascinating to see firsthand. And there are people that are working as part of a company, and the way they interact with other people is just like any other, I guess, American city work culture. So, very, very fascinating. Question number 22. Which location is the most demanding / has the longest working hours? Definitely the US, question mark, as in like, it's like a lot of hours. It adds up to a lot. I've definitely consistently done like maybe 60 to 70 hours in my career for the past like 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it is. But also I was kind of doing that whenever I feel like, hey, we could definitely do this better. And I just end up spending 12 hours a day coding. But I think it was just more understood in the US that, yeah, long work hours, if you do that, then you might have a better American dream at the end of the day. So I think it's more palpable, at least in the US compared to the other places I've worked. But don't get me wrong, like there's countries like in China, for example, it's like the 996, where it's 9 to 9 every day for 6 days a week. Like that is intense work culture as well. I just haven't experienced that as like direct. But at least in my experience, in terms of, I guess, demanding long working hours, just because depending on the work you do, of course, the US has this like tangible feeling that everybody understands that it's going to be long and hard working hours. Question number 23. How do HK techies operate? And by HK, we mean Hong Kong. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't spent as much time working in Hong Kong compared to the other places I've lived in, but I think something that I've noticed is, I mean, all the code is still in English. And also, it was quite normal to be working with people from outside of Hong Kong. I guess, like, this remote culture, even back then, it was kind of, I guess, more prominent, where you understood that, hey, you don't limit yourself with just the people in Hong Kong. You can work with everybody around the area. So I think like software engineering in Hong Kong and the software engineers in Hong Kong, at least from my experience, they're just this more flexible workforce that ends up building software, and the way people think are very similar. There's really brilliant people out there. I just haven't, I guess, spent as much time out there to witness more of it. Question number 24. What's been the hardest part of starting your own business? In terms of starting a business versus having a full-time job and everything, in a full-time role, at least as a software engineer, most of what you do is somewhat successful in a sense of you get trusted with these, I guess, specs from like product and design and the business side. And it's like, let's build this. And by successful, I mean, when you release it out there, it mostly works. If it's a feature that requires you clicking a button or filling out a couple forms, like it works. And then to be able to have the, I guess, a sign off to build this feature, a lot of times, like it went through product requirement documents and business requirement documents, and there's reasoning why you want this feature. So that structure of ensuring that you're building something that can be successful is a great feeling. And that usually happens, I guess, hopefully more than half the time, right? But when you talk about starting your own business, it's very different. You just jump into, I guess, a lesser structured environment, and then whatever you build at the end of the day, it's a shot in the dark. It's genuinely, every time I work on something that I'm building right now, I truly believe there's maybe 1 chance out of 10 that it's going to be successful. Whether it's product market fit, or whether I built it correctly, or whether it's something else, it's just this uncertainty of every time you build anything that is so, I guess, like for me, it's exciting, but at the same time, as if you want to start a business, it's something that you got to consider, because it's very demotivating, demoralizing, and you're like, wait, I've tried 5 different things and none of them work. You just got the mentality to be like, wait, maybe the 5 next one of the next 5 might work after that. So those are probably the hardest part of starting a business, at least on my end, is that, especially if I'm a solo founder at the end of the day. So if you don't find somebody else, there's so much uncertainty, and you kind of just keep on wading through. And there's not really a moment where somebody's gonna be like, that's the answer. That's exactly what will make you succeed in everything. It's more just probing. And if you don't have a natural drive and curiosity to just go to the next step, then that gets a little bit hard. But yeah, that's at least been my experience so far. Of course, I'm not the biggest, most successful business owner at the end of the day. I just try and I'll just keep on probing until somebody stops me, I guess. And now we're going to go into the life section. Question number 25. What is the best tip on investing your money? Put all your savings in S&P 500 and don't take it out. It genuinely sounds like a joke, but I'm not kidding here. It will give you around, 8% every year. So if you put $1,000 in there, you'll get $1,080 at the end of the year. And if you do it consistently, it'll grow much quicker. So very, very simply is, wherever you are, Google how to invest in S&P 500. And every time you have a bit of money to save, put it inside that. And actually, to help out the next step, to be like, oh, but how do I do that? The first step is open a brokerage account. I think in the US, I use Charles Schwab, and they've been amazing, so shout out to them. In Canada, you can use something like Wealthsimple, I believe. That's always the first step. So if you want a more specific Googling, you'd be like, how to open brokerage account? And a lot of times, the incentive is that it's usually free to buy ETFs and buy shares. So do that and make your money work for you. I sound like a broken record, but hey, who doesn't want free, in quotation mark, money? Question number 26. What motivates you the most? I think there's two parts to it. Number one is the people. What motivates me as a human is that I get to talk to people and interact with people and share stories with people and learn from other people. So every time, I guess if you have any cool stories, let me know, because I will listen to it and I'll absolutely be fascinated by what the story is. And maybe I'll be like, but what about this? So that's one part of just what motivates me as a human, is just hearing other humans do cool things. But on, I guess, the technical side and the more building stuff, is what motivates me is that sometimes I'll be doing something and it's so inefficient and you could find a solution to make it better. So what motivates me is probably just solving problems that pisses mostly Perry off. I'm not finding problems that pisses the whole world off. It's a lot of times I'll just come across something and be like, oh, I hate copy pasting this password every time it's generated and I have to make a new account with a new password. I write a script for it and I try to share it online. So those are the kind of stuff that I'm a big geek at the end of the day. But it motivates me to be like, wait, as a human, you could solve problems, and there's so many problems to solve. And whether you channel that energy as a script, or whether you channel that energy through your social media, or whether you channel that energy into a new company or something, it's just these exciting possibilities that as a human, you could do things, you can make things better, and see what happens if you try solving them. Question number 27. What's your opinion on hustle culture? So for the people who don't know, hustle culture is basically the people who would be like, oh, I'm on the grind, I need to make this work, I need to spend all my time doing on this. Forget about the typical 9 to 5, this is the hustle culture where we're going to be successful and you got to believe in me kind of thing. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's at least how I would describe the hustle culture. And to be fair, I'm guilty of it sometimes. Some of the conversation at a bar, when I'm talking to people, I'll be like, I'm going to spend all my time doing this. I'm going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to spend 3 hours coding and then go to my full-time job and all that. I've said so many of this stuff over the years, and funny enough, I still really enjoy coding before work, so I may be some of the problem if you consider hustle culture a problem. But on the other end, is it really a problem at the end of the day? It depends on what it makes other people feel. I talk about this where hustle culture, people can be hustling and doing their thing, and they could just not let anybody know, more on the behind the scenes side, and I'm kind of on that end. Sometimes when I'm in a venture, I'm more behind the scenes, and I kind of just explore things. But then there's the other people who are just blasting all of it on social media and all that. And if you look at both situations, it's great. I personally think this hustle culture is empowering for a lot of people to see wait, there are people out there putting in the work and trying to make it big and producing really cool tracks or producing really cool movies and doing all this kind of stuff. But then on the other side, there's the aspect to be wait, there's so much signal and so much sensory, I guess, overload of everybody's around me is doing so many things. What about me? I'm not doing anything. Do I need to be on this hustle culture? And it's kind of a infectious thing to be either FOMO or fear of missing out kind of thing. I'm okay with it in the sense of I love hearing about cool stories, but I also understand that not everybody wants to be completely spat in the face. They'd be hearing about everybody's new thing, and every time they turn a corner, somebody's selling them something and all that. So for me, it's understand what hustle culture is, and if you don't enjoy it that much, then try to filter out as much of it as you can. But then if you do enjoy it, I think embrace it, whether you're part of it or you want to be part of it, or it just makes you more empowered. I guess hustle culture might be a good outlet. Question number 28. What's something that surprised you in the last year? In the last year, I've definitely focused a bit more of my spare time into, I guess, building a business, if anything. And what surprised me was how easy it is to open a company. I mean, easy in the sense of financially, for example, you need maybe a couple $100. I'm not saying everybody has a couple $100 lying around, but if you honestly have maybe, I think $200 in the US, you could open a company. Or in Canada, if you have like $400 Canadian, you could open a company. But opening a company could probably take you like less than a day, if anything. The surprise is once you have a company, then getting a bank account and getting everything else is very straightforward. So that's kind of been the surprise for me, is that this mental barrier of, but opening a company is so big, so large, like what about the employees and everything, is, yeah, it will happen when you get to the problem of like handling HR. But if you're just starting, it's very simple. Your whole operation is very simple. So that's at least what surprised me, is that the more I spend time trying to make a business work and everything, is the barrier is more mental than physical. Question number 29. What's something that you wish you did more of? In terms of stuff that is maybe not related to tech, is I keep on talking about left brain and right brain. Right brain is like very technical, like line by line, by the book kind of thing. I do want to do more left brain stuff. Not that I'm not doing anything. Once in a while in New York, we go to museums as a group and draw. Like, it sounds really geeky. It sounds like something you do in high school, but somehow it's really fun and you get to maybe drink after or something. So that's a good incentive. But there's those kind of left brain activities that I really enjoy doing. We're humans at the end, and anything that makes you excited, whether it's like drawing or whether it's like, I do want to make jewelry at some point. Like just playing with like welding and trying to like make cool pieces, like rings or whatever. That's something very hands-on, so I think I'm just leading to the fact that I probably code a lot and I type a lot, but I want to use my hands to do other things in terms of something more tangible and something more hardware-focused. That's probably what I wish I did more at the end of the day. Question number 30. What's an experience you have on your bucket list? My answer for this is so shallow. I want a first-class flight experience. I could get by with only economy, but it's just something like, if it's on my bucket list, then one day, yes, first class flight, regardless of if I'm ended up paying for it or somebody else ends up paying it, that or like a private jet flight. Question number 31. What life goals are you planning to achieve in the next 5 years? Financial freedom. It's basically having fuck you money, where you have enough money to tell anybody to fuck off. Yeah, I just realized that's a really shallow answer as well. But I think like, what's more interesting is how to get to that point. And of course, I think a lot of times like the path that people will give a shot is starting your own business, starting your own project. And at least for me specifically, is when I start my own project, I want to be working on something that directly makes other people's lives better. It sounds way too optimistic and way too like goody more than anything on that. But there's so many ideas that you end up, hey, if I could help one person have a better day to day, then that's a good start. And then if that one person becomes 2 people, and then 3 people, and then let's say 100, like 500, and then it kind of gets bigger. That's kind of what I want to try to achieve, at least. I want to try to tackle this. In the next 5 years, maybe a successful company that just helps somebody have a better day to day consistently. Also, actually having a family and raising kids and all that, that will come probably in the next 5 years, but I clearly want to talk about money and tech more. Question number 32. And I'm reading this word for word. Not necessarily specific to your career within dorkware engineering, but how do you properly map out the learning of a new skill? That can be anything from learning a new piece of language or like learning a new position on the footy pitch. Yeah, I love that. What works for Perry? It doesn't work for everybody, but I like to break down what I don't know. So, for example, the two examples that happened like not too long ago is I wanted to learn how to play Redbone from Childish Gambino on the guitar. And this was during the pandemic, and I've never really picked up a guitar ever before. Like, never. Once you have that goal, you kind of have to figure out what's the next step. So step number 1 is get an electric guitar and get an amp. So first step is buy those things. And then the second step is figure out, can I just jump into it and straight up learning the song by heart or something? And the answer is, yeah, you can get away with it, but a lot of times it's actually a lot smarter to just learn maybe one note at a time instead of trying to string like all 8 of them together or something like that. So that's at least my approach, is a lot of trial and error, but the important part is having a goal that's reachable and then also knowing what's your next step. So going a lot from 0 to 1s, like my 0 to 1 for that example was just buying an electric guitar and just having it so that you could even start building on top of it. And I guess another example on the technical side is there was a point in my life where I wanted to learn Golang. It's another programming language that's different than JavaScript, different than Java and all the other ones. And the reason why I want to learn it, that's a different question. This is not the question I'm answering right now, sorry. But to learn it when you're starting from, I guess, nothing, in the sense of I've never written Go ever in my life, was basically figure out what's your goal. My goal number one is write a hello world program, which is basically a program that spits out the word hello world on your screen. And to do that, you just go learn how to install Go, and then write the very simple couple lines to spit out the word hello world, and then run it. So looking at the goal and looking at how you take the first step and knowing how to take the first step, it's usually a good indicator. And a lot of times if you don't know what the step is, your current step or the first step or the next step, ask people. The world is so big with so many answers that you can't ask people for it. So at least that's the method I use to learn new skills and really break everything down. I can spend another 4 hours talking about footy in terms of what's my current goal right now. Back then, my first goal was learning how to run with a soccer ball, a football, in a straight line efficiently. And it was really dumb because I used to use the inside of my foot to run in a straight line. But then the more I talk to people, the more I look at YouTube videos and everything, is the more efficient way to run forward with a soccer ball or football is using the outside of your foot. And once you realize that, it's like, duh, and then you practice it. So anyways, that was another example of just trying to learn a new skill, but figuring out what's the next step. Question number 33. How do you get yourself to dive into an endeavor, or when you decide to do something, even if you may not have experience in that thing? I think the how part, the motivation part, is really like the key. Because the thing is, like, it's easily understandable if I don't have any motivation. There's days where I just wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do any of this. And there's a lack of motivation. But then there's the other part to be like, why am I doing this? I want to learn Go. I want to learn how to play Childish Gambino's Redbone on the guitar because I think it's cool. So I think a lot of my motivation to do things is because I think it's cool. And whether it's about sharing it to people or just for myself, that's a personal reason. But for me, it's just like I get myself to do things just because I think it's cool. And the fact that I believe it's possible. And especially if it's something that is I don't have any experience in, is I live for that thrill. I live for the thrill that I've never seen something for the first time, and I'm like, wait, you could do this? That actually is a motivator for me to dive into something that I have never experienced before. Question number 34. What advice would you give to 20-year-old Perry? Oh boy, where do I start with this one? If I had to put everything together, the biggest highlight is spend more time with your parents. They care so much about you. They genuinely do. And the important part is that you need to care just as much about them. You need to actively care about people. That's probably what I'm saying, especially your parents. So I guess the advice for Perry, 20-year-old Perry, which is about more than a decade ago, take every opportunity to travel with them. Who cares about work? Who cares about excuses? Who cares about, oh, I'm not feeling it right now? Who cares about the money even sometimes? Like, every second you spend with your family, your parents more specifically, is worth it. Question number 35. What advice would you give to those in their 20s? Yeah, so this time, instead of speaking to Perry, I would kind of say the theme is really just be excited about doing things. It's weird to think about it. I also don't want to promote this hustle culture, but I think in your 20s, you have so much room to fail. And that's the biggest power, is that once in a while, when you look at all these people like that are maybe later in their career and they're successful or not, they, I guess, like have maybe more things, more baggage that they're holding on to. And if they fail at different points of their life, it might be more significant than failing early on in your life. So I think a lot of times is try out stuff that makes you scared. Try to be adventurous. If you want to start a clothing company, do it. If you want to start public speaking, like, give yourself a shot, because if you never give yourself a shot early on in your life, then you won't be in the rhythm. You're not going to get it right the first time. But it's more like, if you don't give yourself the chance to practice early on in your life, that's really what I'm trying to highlight here, is practice early on. The more you discover what you like or don't like early on in your life, it makes it a lot easier. So if you need help with motivation, if you need help with finding ideas, and if you need help with just like saying yes to things, being more of a yes person than a no person, talk to other people who do that, who've done similarly, and there's just so much to learn about. So I guess it's a big general advice of motivation and be excited about something, because I truly believe everybody has something that they like doing, and you could definitely be content doing it. Whether it's gaming, whether it's anything like that, you could definitely be content in your 20s. In your 30s, though, that's a completely different game, so I'm kidding. Question number 36. What do you feel is the most important part of the mindset when training for a marathon? Hey, for context, I did run the New York City Marathon back in November 2023, so that was really, really cool. And I promised the people that after I'm done running the marathon, I'm not going to talk about it, but here we are, just talking about it a little bit more again. But thanks for the question. In sense of mindset when training for a marathon, my personal training was maybe 16 to 18 weeks, maybe like that. And the mindset is that be prepared to find a reason to do it. For me, the reason was just that, hey, it's a street party and also got into the marathon for free. So it's like, it'd be a failure if I didn't finish something that I got for free. So at least like that's the motivation I had. But just think about the consistency and the practice and knowing that you do it for yourself. Who cares about what other people think if you finish it or not? Just think about, hey, it's a challenge for yourself. And mindset wise is understand that you're in your own head. It's definitely a mental thing because I genuinely believe your body's going to be ready. If you spend the 16, 18 weeks training, your body's going to be ready. But in terms of mentally, you just got to find a way to distract yourself. For me, like I listen to a lot of music and podcasts while I run. So that's one way of not being too much in my head while I'm training for it. But the mindset is really just think about, hey, you're a human, you could definitely do incredible feats. So just put it in that perspective that it's a slow burn, but it's all about you. It's really all about you and you doing something that you're going to be proud of yourself. Question number 37. What kind of girl do you like? Thanks for the point blank question, Tim. The answer is always going to be Keira Knightley. And also, in all honesty, like, the most attractive thing about a person is, for me at least, their wittiness. They could be hilarious. I absolutely love hilarious people. But if somebody's, like, hilarious and witty, I'm gone. I'm sold. Question number 38. How do you persuade a girl to accept an open relationship with you? Speaking as an engineering manager, you should write out an SLA, present the terms to her, and see if it meets their expectations. Alright, on to the travel category. Question number 39. Of all the places you've lived so far, what is your favorite? So I've lived in San Francisco, New York City, Hong Kong, Montreal, London, and my favorite one has to be New York City. It's just so electric. It just has everything there. But it's also really freaking expensive, so. Question number 40. Why is New York City the best city in the world? The accessibility. I think the fact that nearly everything is connected, like the buildings, the work, the hanging out, the culture, the arts, the events. There's just so much intermingling that if you are that kind of person that enjoys this kind of maybe sensory overload and be able to just walk down the street and just take a subway and literally be at any parts of the city, I think that's one of the appeal of why people want to be in New York City. It's also, I think, one of the most populous city in America, at least. So, at least in the North American game, if you want a very busy, dense city with a lot of cool things that you can learn, then that's why I kind of categorize New York City as such a fun place to live in, because you get to do that on a day-to-day basis. Question number 41. How do you like life in New York City versus San Francisco? And what cities are good for what? Yeah, dovetailing to the previous answer, as I was saying, New York City, like, very electric. If you like going out, if you like having that pace, a certain pace of doing things and meeting people at random times of the day, then that's kind of what I describe New York City. What I do like about San Francisco is also the fact that there's a lot of culture there still, and there's a lot of tech, so that's fortunately, at least for Perry, is like kind of down my alley. But the fact that if you do have the intent of, exploring more the nature side and having a bit more freedom, a bit more space to breathe, that's also another appeal of San Francisco. But yeah, if it's helpful, if you have to make a choice between one versus the other, I think both places you will find happiness. Regardless if you're a very buzzy person that wants like a high intensity schedule or like maybe a laid back schedule, you will be able to find that in both cities. So, question number 42. If you had the choice to live in any city, which city would you choose and why? I'm assuming this is for cities that I've lived and not lived in yet, so there's actually so many other cities, aside from the ones I've lived in, that I want to do, like Tokyo, Singapore, Paris, Barcelona, Mexico City. Like, so many of them have not only a cool tech hub, but so much culture behind it. So I think I'm just throwing a couple out there, but those are definitely on my mind in terms of, hey, I want to live there. Question number 43. Which cities do you want to live in next? Yeah, sorry, I kind of prematurely answered it in the previous question, but yeah, some of the biggest cities in the world I still want to explore at the end of the day. But if we emphasize on next, as in maybe within the next 3 years, I definitely want to put like maybe Tokyo, Singapore up there. I think there's something so appealing about how they build tech over there, and I definitely want to check it out as a first-hand experience of living in these, I guess, Asian hub cities and see how they operate. Question number 44. Ever coming back to SF? The answer is yeah, one day. I absolutely would love to live there again. Maybe after my quest of living into more different cities. Who knows? Question number 45. When are you next visiting the UK again? For this one, I need to apologize. I've told so many people I'm going to visit back the UK again. I moved out of there in 2019, if I remember correctly, and I haven't been back since, and I feel so bad, but I think there's so many opportunities, and I'll just gotta find one and just stick with it, so that's on me. But UK peeps, I'm coming back soon. Question number 46. What is your favorite memory in the UK? So many good ones. Shout out to everybody who I've met in the UK, but my favorite memory probably, I think the first Premier League match we got invited to through the company that I used to work for, Hirespace. We got invited to a Premier League game in Leicester. It was Leicester versus Hull, and it was just a surreal experience because for me to experience European football firsthand, that definitely marked a good experience, a good memory in the UK. But another event that we got invited to, and I remember this kind of clearly, it was the BT Sports Awards. You could picture like a big venue, and there was like maybe 50 dining tables, and then you were sitting at different tables with different, I guess, really important sports people, question mark. Obviously we got invited, but we sat at the last table possible. We were like table maybe like 58 or something like that. It was quite funny, but throughout the night you would see like very significant people go up on stage. You'd have like Raheem Sterling, who's a great footballer, and he plays for England. Gareth Southgate was at that dinner as well, so it was just like suiting up and just meeting so many cool people at that venue. That was a great memory, and the funniest part was that I was there with obviously with a couple co-workers and Will as well, the CEO of the company. We had a great night. We went to the after party. It was really cool. We ended up meeting loads of people. I got home around maybe like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I slept through every single alarm. By the time I woke up, I had like 4 phone calls trying to get through me. I actually woke up because of the last phone call, and then with somebody else to be like, "Perry, you alive? You coming to work today?" And then I was like, "Yeah, I'm coming." But yeah, I walked in and Will was there, Jake was there also, another person that I went to the party with, and they were fresh. They were like, they probably got home later than I did, and they were there already fresh the next morning. So it was a bit embarrassing on my end to be like, "Oh man, I was clear at the same event as them." But they're really cool people. Like, I'm telling you, it was a really fun night. It was a really fun memory, and the people there was even better. So one of my favorite memory in the UK for sure. Question number 47. What is the favorite place you visited? I'm going to exclude the places I've lived, of course, but one of the trip that I did was Budapest, Bratislava, and then Prague, and we traveled between buses and trains between those 3 cities, and it was just so fun, and so maybe I would say like rustic. It's a little bit closer to like the Eastern European side, but I think there's just something so cool about it, like the ruin bars in Budapest, and there were just so many accessible things that I've never seen before. And some of the food in Bratislava, for example, like it was kind of like a goat cheese mac and cheese kind of situation. Delicious. So I think that experience of traveling between those three countries, those 3 cities even, is probably one of my favorite. Question number 48. What is your funniest travel story? Oh man, this one was really dumb. We ended up going to a friend of ours' beach house in south of Spain, and that's the only place I've ever been in Spain. I've been to Barcelona, I've been to Madrid, but so anyways, it's a beach town, so people go there during the summer, and it's really nice. It's really pretty. So there was a friend hosting us, and we were 4 guys basically visiting during that time. And then it was really cool because they had a basement setup where we could all sleep, and that's kind of where we slept. But since it's kind of warm, we usually turn on the AC during the night, and we just sleep like that. But what was hilarious was somehow the AC got so cold. It was probably maybe like 15 degrees Celsius or even lower, that we were just shivering the whole night. And nobody was, we were kind of maybe too embarrassed to say anything or like to change the AC back to whatever, something like a more reasonable temperature. So that, I remember that night, we were all just freezing. And it was like the nicest place on earth with like the nicest beaches and all that. And then when we got woken up, a friend opens the door to the basement, and you can kind of see this like condensation just come out of the room. It was hilarious, and I absolutely died when it happened, physically because I was freezing my butt off, but also the fact that we were looking at it was really dumb. So that was probably one of my funniest travel story that happened. Question number 49. Travel wise, what is your dream holiday destination and why? I don't have one specific location, but I definitely do know that it's not a beach thing. I'm not a big like beach person. I do enjoy it, maybe like one day or two, but anything longer I get so bored. So I guess my dream destination is like throw me in the middle of somewhere that I'm completely unfamiliar with and have to kind of dig my way out. It may not seem enjoyable, but I think it's really just experiencing local culture and local, I guess, habits and just seeing how the world functions differently than what I'm already used to. So dream destination, that's why I kind of like these trips that are kind of chain. For example, one of my upcoming dream destinations that I want to do is Mexico, from Mexico going all the way to, I guess, Brazil. So in between all that, you have the Colombias, you have the Honduras, you have all the Nicaragua in between. Like, that would be a dream trip for me to go, which I've never been to any of these countries. And another, I guess, like dream destination would be something like Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So if you're able to do all that by bus, car, train, whatever, that's what appeals to me, and I definitely have those on my list at some point. Question number 50. What countries do you want to visit, and why? Yeah, I've kind of given a general answer previously with those multiple countries I've listed, but for me, it's really just experiencing, I guess, like a different lifestyle. I'm super fascinated, for example, in Africa. You, of course, have South Africa, so I want to definitely check that out. But then there's like the other middle parts of Africa, and North Africa, and like East Africa, and then you also have the other parts of, for example, I guess, Europe that I've yet to visit, and I definitely want to check out, like Poland, for example, or even Estonia. And the why in this whole question is usually because I'm just curious. And then, of course, it's just good to, travel a little bit once in a while. Question number 51. Hotels or flights? Which would you splurge on? If I had to choose one, I'd probably splurge on the hotel, mostly because you spend more time in the hotel, I guess, overnight. As opposed on a flight, it's usually like a quick experience and you kind of just suffer through the flight and you kind of enjoy where your destination is at. So if I had to choose, it's probably hotels, but in general, my day-to-day travels or my travels in general, I rather spend the money on the experience rather than the stay and the flights. It also gives you a good reason to go out there. If you have a shit hotel, might as well just visit the city more, if that makes sense. Question number 52. When are we building our product and moving to South America? Shout out to you, Juan. I've spoken to you so much about this, where it's like, yeah, let's build the next thing, and this is a dream of mine to be able to start, I guess, company not just in where I live, but somewhere around the world. So I'm very fortunate to keep on meeting and bumping into really cool people that wants to do things, and yeah, soon we're building it and we're moving to South America. And on to the section about food. Question number 53. About food, what were you like as a child? Something about me, I'm not very picky, but there's stuff that I know I hated back then, but I actually really like nowadays. Aubergines or eggplants, as people know them. Back then, there's just something I really disliked about them, but nowadays, I'm all for it. Like egg parm, or even just like steamed aubergine with like garlic on it and soy sauce. Like, there's these dishes nowadays that are just so delicious. Maybe they've learned over the years to make aubergine taste better. Maybe it's that, or maybe my taste buds have changed over the years. The one thing I still hate, though, is cucumbers. They're so watery. It's such a waste of vegetable. Like, give me any other ones, I'll devour it. But cucumbers? I don't know what's going on with you. Question number 54. What are your 3 best dishes or meals in London? This question is so subjective, and from Perry's experience, for those who know me in London, and sometimes I talk about this, is I've made a list of the best fried chicken in London, and I've also made the list of the best pizza in London. So my answer is going to gear towards that more than anything. For fried chicken, there's a place called Chick and Sour. It's in the West Side. It's spelled Chick ''N'' Sour. The burger is humongous. It's a fried chicken burger, and it's probably one of the most flavorful. Like, there's sweet, tangy, spicy. It kind of came with it. I don't know if it's still there, but definitely one of my favorite fried chicken places in London. As for pizza, I know London is not a pizza city, but if you go to Shoreditch, there's a place called Voodoo Ray's. There's always something that I enjoyed there, so I think that's probably number 2 in terms of favorite meal in London. And number 3 would be, this one's neither fried chicken or pizza, but we had a friend's birthday dinner inside of the Hippodrome, which is a casino in London, and I think the experience was really fun. It was a private room, and then they brought you your meal, and they brought you wine, of course, as you dine. And once you're done, you just go straight into the casino and all that. So I think the experience itself was just quite unique, and I really thought that was really, really cool. Question number 55. Best meal or food experience ever? There's a place in New York City, I think it's in Hell's Kitchen, and People know that I like all you could eat food, like bottomless places, and that place is actually like quite a nice Italian restaurant. But they do this thing called a Sinfonia di Pasta or something like that, and all you do is like you order it and you have a plate. They give you a little side of parm, and there's people that walk with these kind of like cauldrons of pasta, and they just ask you if you want more. I think there's like 3 selection for the whole night or something, but it's like seafood pasta, and then another one is like a tomato sauce pasta, and like I'm pretty sure they rotate it as they go. But all you do is you just sit there and people just ask you if you want more pasta, and it's honestly so affordable. That's probably why I remember this experience. It's because it was $30 per person, excluding tax and drinks and all that kind of stuff. But for New York City, it's incredibly affordable, especially it's bottomless pasta at this point. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but it's Becco's in Hell's Kitchen. It's spelled Becco. I would definitely go back in a heartbeat. Question number 56. What is your favorite New York restaurant? Of course, I've answered the previous question with the New York restaurant, even though the question was like any experience in the world. But no, I could add 2 more favorites in New York City if people want to hear about it. One of them being Two Bros Pizza. I never had a bad slice from them, so that's amazing. The slices used to be $1, but they're $1.50 now. What isn't? But definitely, if you're in New York City, just pick up a slice from Two Bros. You could not go wrong with that. And another good call out is a steakhouse, if you guys are a fan of that. It's called Keen's, Keen''S. It's in Midtown, I think near the Empire State Building. Great experience over there. It's not cheap either, but the steak is just so good. And also the vibe is like super old school. Question number 57. What is the largest amount of food you've eaten in a single sitting? Back in the Bay Area, I was following the Canadians. I'm still following the Canadians, Montreal Canadiens, the hockey team. And it was in the playoffs. And one of the spot in Berkeley, in the Bay Area, they were hosting a watch party, and you buy this ticket or whatever, it's like $30, and it was all you could eat poutine. It was so good, but at the same time, it was so much food, because when it's all you could eat, it's loads of fries, gravy, and cheese. So I remember I just shoveled so much fries, poutine, like gravy, and cheese in me in a single sitting during that whole like Montreal game. So that was maybe like 2 hours sitting. I couldn't even move. It was insane. I actually rode my motorcycle there with a couple of friends, and I don't think I was able to ride back. I was genuinely standing there, like, catching my breath after the whole thing, and I was like, I cannot ride this back. So funny enough, I literally walked around, and they were really cool, they waited for me, but I walked around for maybe 10-15 minutes to, like, digest, just to figure out how the hell am I going to make it back over the bridge back to San Francisco. Yeah, that was probably the most amount of food I've had in a single sitting, and it was poutine. That place was called Augie's, Augie, if I got that correctly, out in Berkeley. I don't know if they're still there, but that poutine was mean and delicious. Question number 58. What is the most exotic dish you've had? I think in terms of maybe exotic, maybe I've had frog legs before. I've had alligators before, and those are pretty fun, I guess. They taste like chicken. Actually, the one that I can remember the most is when we were in that trip Spain for a week or something like that. I think it's just the area has so much seafood. There was like squid, but like very fresh squid, and like there was also all these other fishes that I can't even name, and they put all that into a paella. I think that whole dish was so exotic in the sense of it's a lot of like seafood and a lot of, I guess, food that I don't usually eat and haven't eaten before. So that was definitely a big highlight of that trip. Question number 59. If you are condemned to eat one type of meat for the rest of your life, which would it be? I'd probably have to say like beef, like steak more specifically. Yeah, I think if I had to choose one, it would be beef. Question number 60. Durian. Love it or hate it? I think I still kind of hate the smell of it, but in terms of eating it, I found so many good dishes that are made with durian. If you go to dim sum places, sometimes they kind of do these like deep fried durian bites, and those are delicious, and I would definitely eat that like anytime. But I think it really needs to grow onto you as a fruit and as a flavor. I've still yet to have the habit to just eat a fresh durian and just like have it as a snack, so that's not my routine at the moment, but I don't think I'm on a holy war to absolutely hate it. And if you guys don't know what durian is, go Google it. It's a very spiky looking fruit, but the inside is quite soft and stinky. Question number 61. What is the best pizza in the world? I'm a big fan of grandma slices. It's just a slice that looks a bit square and maybe a bit thicker than your usual New York pizza. But anywhere that offers a grandma slice, I'm sold. And if there is a spot in New York that does really good grandma slices, people generally would say like l'industrie in Williamsburg and all that. I've never had it, so I don't know if it's actually that good. But personally, the one that really pops in my mind more than anything is there's this place called Rome to Brooklyn. Rome like Rome, the city. And I think that one is also in Williamsburg or something. So I remember getting a grab a slice from there, and it's just so good. So Rome to Brooklyn, shout out to you. You guys do really good slices there. And on to the last section with miscellaneous questions. Question number 62. How long should a podcast be? I really think it's preference. I think maybe if you want to look at stats and data, people might say like between 30 to 45 minutes might be good, just because the attention span is like long enough to have enough information, but short enough for the attention span. I don't know, there's something about that. But when I say preference is I'm a person that I love listening to podcasts while I run, for example. And the longer the episode, the better. The more coherent, the more there's a story behind it. I enjoy that. So maybe anything between like an hour 30, that's where my preference is. But it depends on podcasts as well. Some podcasts are like 3 hours long or maybe longer. They do episodes an hour each so that you can actually like pace them just like any movie or any show. So if you guys are interested in this podcast, the way I do this is I usually talk to guests before I record them, and I kind of give them a heads up that it's about 60 minutes long. But if they want to go shorter, we go shorter. And if they just want to keep on running and letting the whole thing record, then it just gets longer. So guidance-wise, I usually aim for 60, but that's kind of my, I guess, preference at the moment. It usually goes long because, I don't know, people love talking and people love sharing their stories. Question number 63. What is your favorite style of hat? Oh, I've got to say this might be my favorite question of this whole episode. Thanks, Max. It's funny because growing up, I've had this phase where I would only wear snapbacks. Like, Monday to Monday, snapbacks. I've probably owned like 30 plus snapbacks, and you could just change between all of them. And it was just, I don't know, it was just so easy. And you have all the colors, match your outfit. The white ones usually get dirty really quickly, so not the biggest fan of those. But for the people who I definitely grew up with in Montreal, you probably recognize me in a snapback. Nowadays, I'm more of a baseball cap hat. And the difference is the panel is a little bit, curved, if anything. I don't know, I think the look is just more sleek. It's very much just preference. And for me to wear these kind of hats is more just comfort. Don't have to do my hair, just wear them. And it also blocks the sun sometimes. So, yeah, in summary, back then, a lot of snapbacks, big fan of those. But nowadays, way more of a baseball cap kind of person. Question number 64. Why do you do toilet reviews? I'm always embarrassed to talk about this topic, but I also love it at the same time, so... context, if you guys follow me on Instagram, whenever I go to restaurants, public restaurants or public spaces, I usually, whether have food there, but I'll also do like a quick toilet review just to be part of the experience. And I think it initially started just because I thought it was a joke, or maybe it was like a really nice bathroom. I was like, guys, you got to check it out. So I posted on my story there. And then once that started, I guess, I just kept on going because fortunately, when you go to so many public places to eat, you just kind of experience it. So I was like, might as well share that part. And I get more comments every time to be like, oh, that's what a men's bathroom looked like. Like, what is that thing? And I was like, that's a urinal. Hey, if it makes people smile a little bit, then so be it. Question number 65. Where was your best toilet review? Funny enough, I had to dig this up recently because I got asked this, not because of this podcast, just because I talk about this way too much. This was back in London. There's a place called Camden House in Camden, and that place is spectacular. I actually have the video on my Instagram. It was unique cubicles. It was relatively quiet between cubicles, so that was great. The theming was like really chic, matte black everything. Each stall had like probably like 60 toilet rolls or something like that. The faucet had like hand soap, but also the moisturizer. Like it kind of came in every single stall. And it was just very clean in general. There's also a bit of music, so that kind of helps. So I'm kind of going through all these criterias. It didn't smell bad at all. But that was probably the only place I've given a 5-star as a toilet review. So Camden House in London, very, very enjoyable experience there. Question number 66. Where was the worst toilet you've reviewed? So many bad ones. The biggest culprit, now that I remember after all these years, is steak houses. Like, the front of the house will look impeccable, but then most of them have really terrible bathrooms. So, next time we go to a steakhouse, I'll put the bet that they have a pretty bad bathroom. But if I had to call out one single place, there's this place in London, in the area, Elephant and Castle, and it's called Mercado Metropolitano. It's kind of like a outdoorsy bar, but it also has its on-site brewery as well, so it's really cool. It's like very outdoorsy, and they actually have a lot of food stalls for a lot of people. So it's kind of like just a communal space for food stalls and drinks and all this kind of stuff. But the bathroom there, at least the men's bathroom, like, it's probably the worst bathroom I've seen. Like, guys know this, that if you go into a men's bathroom, sometimes you'll just see a sheet and you just pee in there, and like that's totally normal and everything. But this one was just the worst. It was a sheet, but the setup was bad and it smelled bad, and you could see all the grime on it, and then like even the washing sink, the faucet was terrible on that, and it was so tight as well, so that when you go in and out, you're always bumping into somebody accidentally. But yeah, I clearly remember that experience. Question number 67. Why do you have the toilet reviews right after a story of food? Yeah, I like these logistics questions. So when I do post these stories, if you guys are interested, is I usually like go to a restaurant, for example, and then I kind of like show a bit of the food that I eat, and then like immediately after the food, that's when I post the toilet reviews. And my answer to this is that I don't have another better time to put it. I'm not going to put it before the food, and I'm also not going to put it like 2 days later, just because I'll forget about it. So I think it's by process of elimination that the toilet reviews come after the food, because I don't have any other better spots to put it. Question number 68. What is your top 3 video games of all time, based on your enjoyment at the time of playing them? The most favorite game ever, Pokemon Snap on N64. Like, it's so addictive. It was just, I think, the variable that you could take a photo, but then depending on how you capture the Pokemon within the frame, like, get more points and less points, and I honestly probably spent like just days thinking about playing the game and playing the game. So that was definitely a highlight growing up for sure. Pokemon Snap on N64 specifically, one of the greatest game made ever. For the other 2 spots, Super Smash Brothers, whether it was on N64, the GameCube, or the Wii, or anything after the Switch, I think all of them I've enjoyed playing. There's never a time where it didn't get competitive, and I think it's really like being able to play with other people and being competitive and just like enjoy beating and also losing sometimes at the same time. Super Smash Bros. Is definitely probably number 2, if not 3 in this list. The other game that I remember playing a lot, it's called MapleStory. Some of you might know massive online RPGs. I think that's one of the games that I remember grinding, finding the way to get like better equipment, better swords, better shields, better armors. Like the game is still going on if I'm not mistaken, but MapleStory is one of the things where you kind of just learn to grind and the RPG behind it. If you guys want a 4th one that probably nobody knows about, this one is called Priston Tale. It's another MMORPG from back then. Same thing with the grinding and everything, but it was just so engaging, and I kind of really like playing all those games. So great question. Question number 69. Nice. Is it football or soccer? I still gotta go with football. I keep on saying football, and I'm willing to explain it every time to be like European football instead of saying soccer. I know I'm out of context most of the time, but I think it's something about taking a stand. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't really care at the end what people use. It's just something that I'll use, and I'll just keep on using it. And yeah, football is life. Question number 70. Why do you love football? I really don't want to come off as somebody who like lives and breathes football, like English football, right, or European football. I really don't. I enjoy playing it. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy talking about it. But I don't really want to come off as it runs my life. I mean, the Fantasy Premier League is kind of ruining my life, if anything. The sport itself is just so complex in a sense of, yes, there's the physicality of it, of kicking a ball, but there's also like this strategy behind, I guess, how to win games. The higher you go in that competition, like when you get to the Premier Leagues and all the other leagues, the big leagues in Europe and everything, like if you play 4 at the back versus 3 at the back, it's a big difference. And depending on how fast your players are, if somebody's better on the left side than the right side, then there's just so many intricacies that you kind of just think about. And those are the kind of stuff that I actually enjoy. And then it's also a sport that I guess is quite accessible, as in you don't have to buy like a million equipment to play it. You just have to buy like a pair of shoes and you could just go play. So I've kind of found this opportunity that everywhere I've lived, I was able to, I guess, like play the sport and also watch it. That's at least my take on football, why it's so entertaining, is that it gives you a rhythm. When the season is on, it's around maybe a game a week that you get to watch, and I get to play a game a week. So it's kind of this like thing that keeps your clock ticking, and has nothing to do with my job at the end of the day. So question number 71. Can England win the Euros in the summer? And by summer, we mean the summer of 2024, where the Euros are going to happen in Germany, if I got that correctly. England has a squad. I think, like, the current squad of England is probably the strongest it's been in decades, if anything. And even the past tournaments kind of proves it, that getting to the semis, getting to the finals, like, it's reachable. I think the biggest meme is just England winning it. England is not a winning country in football, at least. And I swear, when England does win it, like, we're not going to hear the end of it ever. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I support England just because after living there for a while, you kind of get attached to the people, the culture, and all that kind of thing. So I'll definitely root for England. But when will it happen? Can they do it in the summer coming up? I think we would all love to see it. Question number 72. Tell us one of your most awkward encounters. Fortunately, I don't run into that many awkward encounters, or at least I try to not make them happen as much as I can, but I think this one time, it was kind of awkward actually, is for the people who are on like a TN work visa working in the States or something, normally if you go to the airport and you get your visa over there, they kind of bring you to this other part of the airport where it's kind of like immigration offices, and you kind of just wait in kind of this waiting room to get your application and everything. So I was waiting in one of those rooms one time, and it was empty. It was just me there sitting there. And then the next person that comes into that room is somebody that I knew from back then, and I didn't get along with them for XYZ reason back then. So in that, like, empty room, it was just me and that other dude. And I was like, wait, I know you. And it was just like this empty room in this like pretty official, like, this government place inside of an airport. And it was an awkward encounter. It was kind of like, oh yeah, how's it going and everything. So maybe that was probably the most awkward encounter I've had. Question number 73. Who is your celebrity crush? I've mentioned her name earlier in this episode already, funny enough. Keira Knightley. Question number 74. Do you believe in aliens? I don't actively think about aliens. I think probability-wise, the world is so big. I mean, we have squids and we have dolphins that are really intelligent creatures. So, I mean, think about how expansive the deep seas, but also the space is. So I think chances are there's probably aliens out there. And the last question. Question number 75. Who is your favorite artist? Oof. If we're talking about music artists of all time, I'm going to have to go with Kendrick Lamar. And I also want to take the opportunity to give a shout out to a friend of mine who just started putting her music on Spotify. If you guys want to check out Tomorrow Black on Spotify, she puts out incredible music. It's really catchy. I'm pretty sure she produces everything. So go check her out. It's Tomorrow Black on Spotify. And tomorrow is like tomorrow, the day tomorrow. Well, that wraps up this fourth Ask Me Anything. I do mean I really do enjoy doing these, just because it really gave me a chance to reflect, and even answering these questions, I was like, what am I saying? But hey, that's life, and I really just want to thank you guys again for sending in these questions and to giving me all kinds of comments and for listening. So if you guys haven't done it already, hit the follow button on your podcast app. It really does help, catching up with the latest episodes. And you know what? Just reach out to me. Contact@perrytiu.com. That's my email. If you want to follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, those are all available at perrytiu.com. That's PERYTIU.com. And yeah, I'm always up for a great conversation. So hey, big thank you guys again for listening to the show. Back to our regular programming on the next one. Big love.